Coming up on our newscast tonight. President Moon Jae-in embarks on another overseas trip. The highlights of the three-nation tour include the G20 summit and a possible meeting with his American counterpart. The 6th OECD Forum on Statistics, Knowledge and Policy begins. Policymakers as well as academics and business leaders from some 100 nations gathered in Incheon, South Korea to discuss the future of well-being. NASA's InSight becomes the first robot to land on Mars in over half a decade and begins a 2-year mission to dig deeper into the red planet's structure and find out how it was formed. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Cha. President Moon Jae-in begins his trip to the Czech Republic, Argentina, and New Zealand. Included in his itinerary, the G20 summit and possibly a meeting with the U.S. President Donald Trump. Shin Se-min starts us off with what to expect from this diplomacy tour.
President Moon Jae-in's last overseas trip of 2018 will take him around the world. For 2 days, starting Tuesday the 27th, the president will be making his first stop in Prague, the capital of Czech Republic, where one goal is to help South Korea win a contract to build a nuclear power plant. And from the 29th until the 1st of December, President Moon will be in Argentina for the Group of 20 summit, taking place under the theme of building consensus for fair and sustainable development. For the final 3 days, President Moon will be in New Zealand on a state visit, the first by a South Korean leader in 9 years, during which he will discuss ways to create synergy between his new Southern policy and the island nation's so-called Pacific reset. Plenty of diplomacy on the sidelines of the G20 as well. President Moon will meet with the leaders of South Africa and the Netherlands, both of which are non-permanent members of the UN Security Council. The Netherlands is also on the North Korea Sanctions Committee, which could help in getting more penalties on the regime lifted. And the high-stakes meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, still no plans confirmed yet. The South Korean presidential office says it depends on the receptive leaders' schedules and will be confirmed during the G20 meetings. The top office says the president's last overseas trip of the year will be a chance to widen his scope of foreign diplomacy while pushing for lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula and sharing with the world's economic powers his administration's vision of what makes an inclusive nation. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
High-level talks between Pyongyang and Washington. Some anticipated it could take place as early as this week. Still no word yet on a fixed date, meaning the event could be pushed back to next month. Park Hye-jun zooms in on the postponement that could affect the timeline of other key events on the Korean Peninsula.
The high-level talks between U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and his North Korean counterpart Kim Yong-chol to discuss details of the next Kim-Trump summit and the North denuclearization may end up taking place next month. The originally planned November 8th meeting was delayed right after the U.S. midterm elections. There had been rumors that Washington was looking to arrange the meeting in New York early this week, but it looks like it will be delayed again over the North's failure to respond. The U.S. has been trying to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table by supporting a joint study of the Int'l Railway project and by granting the necessary sanctions waivers. It also recently announced that its annual South Korea-U.S. joint military exercise will be scaled down next year. But still, no answer from the North.
North Korea still holds on to the original plan or strategy to go directly to the very top level of the Trump administration, which is President Trump himself, rather than going through the regular channels of the diplomacy in order to materialize the main agreements both governments agreed in Singapore in June.
The continued setbacks are expected to cause a delay not only in the second Kim-Trump summit slated for early next year, but also on talks to formally end the Korean War and North Korean leader Kim's proposed visit to Seoul. The Seoul government had been hoping to achieve both of these goals within the year. The impasse between Pyongyang and Washington could be broken, depending on the discussions among the heads of regional powers during the upcoming G20 summit. There are also hopes that if President Moon Jae-in sits down with President Trump, he could secure a breakthrough in the nuclear negotiations. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
The very first family reunion for Korean Americans and their relatives in North Korea is looking like a possibility. On Tuesday, Radio Free Asia cited a representative of the National Coalition of Divided Families as saying a senior official mentioned the possibility during a phone call earlier this month with another group. A U.S. State Department official reportedly told the group that Washington has shifted its North Korea policy and made family reunions one of its top priorities. The official added the event could happen before what was called the next nuclear talks, believed to be a reference to the second Pyongyang-Washington summit expected to be held next January. According to the civic group leader, the reunion will likely happen via video or phone. An initial list of those who wish to meet their relatives in the North will be delivered to the State Department. More than 100,000 Korean Americans are believed to be separated from their family living in the regime. The UN's food agency is continuing its food distribution and risk reduction projects in North Korea while taking the authorities on a study tour as well. But they face a major challenge due to sanctions. According to the World Food Programme's country brief issued on North Korea for October, the agency distributed over 1,000 tons of fortified food to 475,000 women and children. It also brought representatives from Pyongyang's foreign ministry and the Statistics Bureau to Laos for a study tour on WFP programs, while starting new forestation projects as well. The agency says there are still serious challenges on the lack of funds and data, as well as the impact of sanctions on the regime's supply chain, mainly on procurement and shipping. No U.S. bomber missions have been flown over the Korean Peninsula since last November when Pyongyang test-fired the Hwasong-15, according to Seoul's defense ministry. Answering reporters' questions at Tuesday's regular press briefing, the ministry's spokesperson, Choi Yeon-soo, said the decision was made jointly by the allies to support recent diplomatic efforts regarding North Korea. In April, during Max Thunder military drills, the deployment of America's strategic bomber assets were also canceled in consideration of these efforts. Earlier this week, Commander of U.S. Air Force's Pacific General Charles Brown told reporters the suspension of bomber missions was to create space for the ongoing diplomatic approach. The 6th OECD World Forum kicked off here in the nation today. Since 2004, the event served as a venue to share knowledge and experience on the role of data and policy in shaping a better world for all. Kim Hye-sung gets us better acquainted with the forum being held in Songdo.
Welcome to the 6th OECD World Forum on Statistics, Knowledge, and Policy.
Around 3,000 policymakers, academics, and business leaders from over 100 countries gathered in South Korea's western port city of Int'l to discuss the future of well-being.
Korea is a unique country in a sense that we have achieved a miraculous economic growth within a short time period, and that people's interest in the future of well-being has never been higher before. In this context, it cannot be more appropriate to hold the OECD World Forum here in Korea this year.
Since the first OECD World Forum in Italy in 2004, the OECD has developed models to measure people's well-being, taking into account factors like work-life balance, environment, and sense of security, which cannot be measured by conventional economic indicators like GDP. This year's forum focused on 3 key trends: digital revolution, new modes of governance, and the role of the private sector, factors that could affect people's well-being over the next 10 to 20 years. The OECD report shows technological advances like AI could disrupt up to 1/2 of the workforce among OECD countries, worsen inequality, and engender political polarization due to fragmented data. The aging population in particular add complexity to this digital transformation, and participants at the forum pointed out that the role of governments is to help provide security for the people through better health care and access to education. But the private sector also plays a critical role.
What businesses need to do is to have products that really deliver good things for the public, healthy foods, products and services that raise people's well-being. Also, taking care of their own workers so that people are able to work in dignity. They have vacation time.
During the 3-day event, policymakers and statisticians will examine detailed ways to push for inclusive growth and formulate a collective action plan Thursday to help improve people's well-being. 김혜성, Arirang News, Incheon.
The Trade Ministry held meetings with the private sector to discuss ways to counter the increasing number of import restrictions on Korean goods. The country is facing a tougher situation with 6 more restrictive measures added in the second half of the year. Yoon Jung-min has the highlights from that session.
South Korea's Trade Ministry said on Tuesday that the country is facing a tougher trading environment due to increasing trade regulations by its partners. According to the ministry, a total of 6 restrictive measures, including 3 anti-dumping duties and 3 safeguards, were newly added to South Korean goods in the second half of this year. So far, 25 countries have adopted a total of 194 trade restrictions on South Korean exports as of November. To tackle these issues, the ministry held meetings with the private sector on Tuesday to review the situation and discuss ways to minimize negative effects on trade. The ministry said it has asked its trading partners to ease such regulations through bilateral channels, while lodging complaints on trade protectionism worldwide through multilateral channels, including the World Trade Organization. It added consulting services for small and medium-sized businesses will be expanded to improve their competitiveness in the global trade market. In a separate meeting on the same day, the ministry, trade agencies, and the private sector discussed ways to combat non-tariff regulations, such as technical barriers and sanitary measures. The participants said they will continue to monitor these barriers and respond against unfair trade practices. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
China is the biggest market for Korean cosmetics. Recently, authorities there have simplified the procedures for the export licensing of such products, allowing easier access. Seo Young gets us up to speed with the welcome developments.
Korean cosmetic firms shipping their goods to China could save a significant amount of time in doing so after China's authorities simplified the license process for imported cosmetic goods. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety in Korea announced on Monday that these new measures will apply to non-special use cosmetics bound for China after November 10th. Export certificates can now be earned simply by submitting requested documents on the website of the National Medical Products Administration, China's regulatory body for drugs and medical devices. Cosmetics are divided into 2 categories in China: non-special use and special use products. Prior to the revision, Korean cosmetic manufacturers are required to submit relevant documents to Chinese authorities offline, and it took an average of 6 to 8 months to receive a final permission for exports. Simplifying the process is expected to cut down on time needed for companies to enter the Chinese market by up to 3 months. China is the biggest market for Korean cosmetic firms. Exports to China as percentage of total outbound shipments has steadily increased over the past 5 years. Given that the cosmetics market is trend-sensitive, enabling companies to enter the market more quickly is likely to have a positive impact on profits for domestic firms, according to the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. Songdo, Arirang News.
Concerns over the prolonged economic slowdown is affecting overall consumer confidence here in the nation. The latest Consumer Composite Index sentiment shows that Koreans haven't felt this negatively about the local economy since last February. Ko Roon-hee provides a closer look.
South Korea's consumer confidence slumped to a 21th-month low in November. Ongoing concerns over the slowing domestic economy and the trade war between the United States and China. According to the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, its composite consumer sentiment index was at 96 points, down 3.5 points from October. A reading below 100 indicates they're more pessimist than optimist about the economy. The index has been falling for 2 consecutive months after a rebound in September. November's figures is as low as the period when former President Park Geun-hye was removed from power early last year on corruption and other charges. However, the central bank said it's relatively hard to directly compare figures for the periods before and after September, as it changed the household samples for the survey last month. As for what's at the root of the low sentiment, the Bank of Korea says consumers are worried the local economy is slowing down due to trade tensions between the United States and China. Washington is set to raise tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports to 25% from 10% in January. If Presidents Trump and Xi fail to reach an agreement at the upcoming G20 meeting in Argentina. The OECD warned last week that the trade spat could knock as much as 0.8% off global GDP by 2021. Sluggish job data was another factor. According to Statistics Korea, South Korea's overall unemployment rate was 3.5% last month, the highest figure for the month of October since 2005. The Bank of Korea also said plunging stock prices affected overall consumer confidence. October was a brutal month for local stocks, with the benchmark Kospi tumbling by almost 14%, its largest all-month decline since 2008. Korean Arirang News.
Turning our attention to the network paralysis caused when a local telecom giant's building caught fire, Seoul's Prime Minister pointed out the nation is underprepared for such emergencies. Int'l promised the government won't make the same mistake twice. Choi Si-young shares with us his remarks.
At a Tuesday cabinet meeting chaired by Prime Minister Int'l, the Prime Minister said the recent service disruptions in Korea's phone and internet networks have exposed the poor management of the country's advanced IT technology. He went on to say the following.
Restoring the damaged networks, finding the causes, as well as those responsible, and rolling out safeguard measures will be our next step.
Earlier on Saturday, a fire at a KT building in Seoul's Ahyeon neighborhood damaged its communications network in much of the capital, shutting down mobile phone and internet services as well as credit card transaction systems. The incident affected millions of KT subscribers and businesses using its lines. The mobile carrier apologized for the inconvenience and has been repairing the damaged infrastructure around the clock. It is also preparing compensation measures, including refunds on their customers' monthly bills. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
The Cheongwade requested a police investigation into an email sent by someone impersonating the National Security Office to experts on foreign affairs. The email contained a document purporting to show the presidential office admitting to a growing divide between Seoul and Washington over North Korea's denuclearization. The Blue House denounced the document, which lacked even the most basic official security features, but whose claims nevertheless made it into the news.
Cheongwade believes this is more than just a false report. In fact, it's so malicious that it's almost impossible to find a precedent for it in media history.
Just yesterday, a local media report used a photo of the document. Its authenticity was immediately challenged by the top office. Cheongwade spokesperson Kim Woo-kyum said the document is harmful to the country and its relationship with the U.S. He added the journalists behind the report will also be held responsible for not doing the bare minimum fact check. The International Labor Organization released its Global Wage Report. Among other things, it showed a worrying slump in wage growth around the world. For details, let's turn to our Hong Yu.
The global economy has been steadily recovering since the financial crisis of 2008. According to the International Labor Organization's latest Global Wage Report, last year the unemployment around the world continued to fall, and wages continued to rise, but more slowly. Compared to 2016, global wages last year rose by only 1.8%, the slowest rate since the crisis and more slowly than the year before by 0.6%. Wage growth has also slowed down in South Korea. According to the Bank of Korea, wages rose by just 0.8% last year, the least since 2011 when wages actually fell by 2.9%. The ILO's Global Wage Report used data from 136 countries. But without China and its rapid economic growth, the wage picture was even gloomier, a worldwide rise of only 1.1%. As for equality in pay, the report finds that women around the world are earning about 20% less than average than men for work of equal value.
In high-income countries, the gender pay gap tends to be higher among top income earners, reflecting to some extent, I think, the phenomenon of the glass ceiling, whereas in emerging and developing countries, the gap tends to be much greater at the bottom end of the wage scale.
One key factor in the gender wage gap was motherhood, meaning women with children earned less than those without. But there was a disparity in wages for non-mothers as well. To achieve social justice for women, the report suggests a need to combat stereotypes and gender discrimination in the labor market. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, NASA's InSight finally touched down on Mars. The robotic lander designed to study the deep interior of the red planet has been traveling through deep space for 7 months. Oh Se-young fills us in on this remarkable breakthrough in space exploration.
NASA's spacecraft InSight is now on the surface of Mars, beginning its 2-year mission to uncover what the planet is made up of. The nail-biting moment came early Tuesday Korea time, just 6.5 minutes after the robot hit the Martian atmosphere at almost 20,000 kilometers per hour. The spacecraft was launched in May from Southern California and traveled a total of 485 million kilometers through deep space. InSight is the first robot to land on Mars in 6 years and has been designed to delve deeper into the structure of the planet and how it was formed. The 3-legged probe will use an array of equipment to drill 5 meters into the Martian surface in order to detect the heat flow. It will aim to see whether the planet is seismically active by observing movements beneath the crust. The spacecraft will also use radio equipment to try and determine the size of the planet's core and whether it's made of liquid or solid. The robot will begin collecting data within the first week of its landing, and NASA will aim to deploy InSight's key instruments onto the Martian ground for assistance within 2 to 3 months. Only 4 in 10 missions deployed to Mars have been successful. For the InSight mission to be deemed a success, it must deploy its solar panels properly. NASA says this cannot be confirmed until more than 5 hours after touchdown. Oh Se-young, Arirang News.
A massive sandstorm has swept through parts of China with dust carried by strong winds blanketing many cities across that country. It's expected to impact Korea as well, prompting local authorities to issue an ultrafine dust warning. Seo Bo-bin explains further.
Beijing and other regions in China are choking under severe smog. As of Monday, a yellow alert for smog was issued in Beijing and other neighboring regions in China. South Korea has also been affected by the smog coming in from China, and the concentration of fine dust has gotten thicker. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, the smog was triggered by yellow dust originating from Inner Mongolia, which had traveled through northeast China. As of Tuesday afternoon, ultrafine dust warnings have been issued all across the nation here in Korea. Ultrafine dust levels have been rising throughout the day, and the concentration levels are very high. Ultrafine dust is more harmful to the respiratory system as the particle size is smaller than ordinary fine dust.
As the yellow dust adds to the fine dust already in our nation, concentration levels will become even higher and will be extremely harmful to our body. The fine dust levels are expected to increase and last until Wednesday.
As northwesterly winds come in, ultrafine dust levels are expected to rise throughout the day, and yellow dust will remain in the forecast until Wednesday morning. Children, the elderly, and people with respiratory disease have been advised to stay indoors. Seo Bo-bin, Arirang News.
Time now to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, on top of the toxic levels of ultrafine dust, smog and yellow dust are blowing into the country.
That's right, Daniel. Now the air is just getting worse, and now more places are breathing in about 3 to 4 times the hazardous levels of the dust. And the air will gradually clear up tomorrow afternoon thanks to the northwesterly wind, but don't let up your guards just yet. Now the high pressure front will push away the approaching clouds tomorrow, so the haze will get better. Temperature-wise, Korea and Beijing are expected to get chillier than today. And the morning in Seoul will be dropping down to 0 degrees Celsius tomorrow, while those in Daegu and Gyeongju will be a little higher. And the daytime high in Seoul will peak up to 10 degrees, while forecasts in Busan and Jeju put it higher into the mid-teens. The weather will stay chilly this week, but temperature readings will be within the norms. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thank you for staying with us.